anyone know where the full screen for this is?
If you, that top, that green and red
There's a
bar,
projector.
it gives you more settings.
No.
Oh, that 3 dots on the right.
Far right.
Are you trying to full screen the,
I'm trying to full screen his PowerPoint.
oh, like the
Oh,
PowerPoint
the PowerPoint.
specifically?
Oh,
There's a little up at the,
present.
yeah.
Yeah, right. We're farmers.
And I'm used to these in places where there's no Wi-Fi and everything's still hardline.
Oh, wow.
So-
We're lucky to have hotspots here.
We
that
are-
don't
Fancy.
Wi-Fi.
We are just moving up in the world. So if Jeanette hasn't done introductions, my name's Ty Kellogg. I'm with the Sherman Insurance Group. And thank you for letting me stretch my legs and get the heck out of the office for a while. Computer screens and claims calls get really dull and repetitive after a while. So I'm glad to get out and talk a little bit about farming, your farm dreams, your farm plan, and how exactly it relates to this really dry, obnoxious subject called insurance. So we will start into that. So a little bit about myself, my family, and the agency. Our agency has 7 generations of farming within the 3 of the 4 of us. So there's myself, my father Jim, and the agency owner Cooper Sherman. So between the 3 of us, there's 7 generations, which is pretty awesome. It's also pretty tasking because we would much rather talk about those things and talk about other things. So half the time when we get calls, we start veering off subject, and next thing you know, a 5-minute car change should be 20 minutes later. We've raised a variety of livestock, pigs, cattle, chickens. I did custom horse hay through high school and early college. We have sweet corn, small orchards. We dabble in maple syrup. When I was a kid, we were cutting Christmas trees, loading them on people's cars. No chainsaws, by the way, that's a bad idea. And too many vegetables to count. My current title is veggie pusher at this rate. It's just, oh, there's a bunch of tomatoes, what are we doing with them? Nothing. Okay, who wants tomatoes? You love your neighbors by how much stuff you put on their front porch and they don't know about it yet. So the farm which I reside on, and my parents and my brother on the opposite side, has been in our family 100 years as of 2015. So my brother's kids and my kids are now the 6th generation on it, which is incredible, but also comes with its own set of headaches, and I won't bore you because what your guys' opportunity is to be hopefully a 1st generation somewhere, so that we will move on to that. In terms of insurance, which is kind of sort of irrelevant to this conversation, between the 4 of us in our agency, there is Debbie, who is our licensed administrator. There's 75 years of experience in insurance of various stages and sizes. So it's not our first rodeo anymore. My dad's got 12 months and 2 weeks until he's finally done. So if you call and he talks about that for a while, I apologize. He's a little excited. So basic overview today, within the next 10-15 minutes, if not less, because insurance can get very lengthy and wordy and dry and boring and either make you sleepy or very angry. We're going to do some very basic things for you. Hopefully, one, give you a very clear understanding of how the insurance industry, it doesn't matter the carrier, but how the industry views farming. Doesn't matter what kind of farming you do, how big or how small, organic, conventional, whatever term you want to use or put yourself in. Insurance industry has a very silo approach to all things. That's how they get their rates. They put everything in these little compartments and then go from there. I'll also give you some questions to consider as you're starting to build out your business plan. I understand a couple of you are within a year, maybe 2 years of venturing out on your own officially, which is great. I'm glad you're getting to that point. Others might be a little further away, but we'll still give you questions that you can drop into your conversations over the next few years as you plan, because there are things that should be considered. And when you're hitting that head against the wall of, well, how do I get over that hurdle and officially start the business or do this, do that? Like, well, these are the questions we unfortunately have to address somewhere. I'll also share with you some of the most common questions we get when we quote a farm. And again, regardless of size or what type or what industry. And of course, I'll try not to bore you to tears because it is insurance. I understand it's my industry and I'm supposed to know about it, but it doesn't make it any more entertaining. So when I was a kid and it came out on the school bus and in the elementary school, like, hey, this kid grew up on a farm. There wasn't this joyous cry, wanted to hug me or give me big warm fuzzies. This is when I heard the term hillbilly for the first time. Even though we live in a river valley and we don't live on a hill technically, but technicalities aside. Most of the non-farming public thinks of us as the Clampetts, which is pretty sad and pretty irritating, but it's what you're up against. The insurance industry, though, thinks of you differently, and we'll talk about that. But before we talk about insurance, it's probably good to figure out, well, what exactly is a farm? Because there are so many different ideas and concepts around farming. But in terms of the biggest oversight body for agriculture, the United States Department of Agriculture, any place which you can basically gross $1,000 or more of agriculture products. So if you sell $1,000 of onions, garlic, eggs, you're a farmer. To put that in perspective, I grew up with white-faced Hereford beef cattle. You send a cow to slaughter, you're probably going to get somewhere around 500 pounds in actual meat after carcass and everything else. Ground beef right now is about $5 a pound depending where you go. That's $2,500 in one animal, just one. Now I'm under oversight from USDA for one animal. That really puts in perspective. You don't have to be big to fall into the definition. The other definition is our good friends at the IRS. Any individual in the business of farming trying to make a profit. Well, and the story is often said that, well, a lot of farmers lose a lot of money, especially in the first few years of your business venture. You put in a lot of capital investment up front to obtain long term. So the IRS doesn't even put a limitation on a dollar figure. They just say you have to try. Sorry to be all doom and gloom to start your dreams already. So here's what the insurance company thinks of farming. You call up your agent and you say, hey, I'm getting into farming. Ding, 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 ding. They're thinking the big green and yellows. They're thinking the red and the blacks. They're thinking big equipment, big investment, big risk, big liability. So if your home insurance is with really any of the standard carriers, they're going to either have a lot of questions or they're going to get really quiet and say, you might need to think of going somewhere else. And we'll talk about why. So insurance does three things for people. In layman's terms, we're going to cover you for losses of physical damage. Fire, theft, collapse, water, pipe burst, electrocution, vandalism, things of that nature, things that we can fully comprehend. A deer jumps in front of your car, that is what insurance is for. Also, what we don't talk about as much is liability protection. You're going to be in business for yourself. So there's going to be, by nature of doing business, you're going to be taking a risk. You're putting yourself out there. If someone sues you, this is what your liability limit is for. The insurance company, without having to use your own dollars, they will say, we have this policy for Jane Smith, John Doe, whomever. They're rated accordingly, their application's not frivolous. We will defend that case unless there's clear, obvious negligence on your behalf. And of course, from my personal issues, one of the things that insurance does, it causes me going to social gathering and they say, oh, what do you do for a living? What do you do for a living? What kind of business do you in? I say, Ty, what do you do? I'm in insurance. And they immediately take one big step away. They don't want me to sell them anything. I get it. I get it. So, like I started to mention, most of your standard home insurance carriers, your Allstates, your Progressives, your Eries, your Nationwides, your Westfields, and you name it, a company, Geico, American Family, you pick a company, they probably have very similar guidelines in that when they think of your homeowner's policy or a renter's policy, you're renting a house from someone, an apartment, they're thinking house in the burbs, in Cleveland Heights, on a nice little tree-lined street, garbage collection. They're not thinking 3, 4, 5, 10 acres behind you with chickens all over the place. They're not thinking goats grazing the front yard because you don't want to get a lawnmower because that's a waste of time and it doesn't make you money. Those are not things they think of when they say home insurance or liability related to your house. They also don't have a lot of flexibility for a lot of things that typically come with farming. Larger buildings, larger horsepowered equipment, of course, livestock. I heard one underwriter say anything with hooves. And I said, well, what if we put boots on them? They did not appreciate this art. Unfortunately, they did not look at it that way. Of course, too, if you're going to farmers markets, I can't think of a market right now for anyone in Northeast Ohio. We're out of Geauga County, so we predominantly work in Ashtabula, Lake, and Cuyahoga. Any farmers market, anyone we've insured to, for the most part, has required some type of liability insurance coverage. That is not going to come from your homeowner's policy or your renter's policy, depending on what you have. And of course, restaurants too, with food tracing continuing to be a big issue, whether they get their greenery from Costco or from Cisco or the market down the street. They want to know where it's coming from, so if someone does get sick, they can point the finger on somebody that's not them. And of course, if you get a business loan, let's say there's 5 acres next door to you down the road that looks fantastic, the soil test comes back great, it is very well draining soil, you know it can work for whatever it is that you have. If you go to your typical bank and you say, I'm using this for farming, half of them won't know what the heck you're talking about, because most of them don't go into farming. So if you go to a farm lender, they might want to see farm insurance and potentially an actual business plan to go with it. And of course, if you've had your nose in the news at all in the last decade, there's ongoing concerns statewide regarding water quality, manure storage and runoff, any type of pollution with any chemicals or fertilizers, organic or otherwise, slow-moving equipment on the roads like small little ATVs or small horsepower tractors. Agritourism, of course, has really become a big deal in the last 10 years with the legislation that was passed. Let's see, that's probably been 8 years now. So your hay rides, your corn mazes, your U-picks, anything that could be agri-tourist activity, and of course, food spoilage. People are very concerned. They do not want to share in the blame should someone turn their ankle coming off a hay ride. Used to be, you turn your ankle, go home, put some ice on it, mom and dad take care of you, and everyone's fine. Well, I wish it was still like that. It is definitely not. It's one of my favorites because it is still prevalent today. So overall, the insurance industry and the personal lines sector, they look at farming, no matter how big or small, they look at it like commercial activity. You are a business, whether it's a sole proprietor, it's in your name, you're an incorporation, LLC, however you set up your business, you are now in the business to make money. That's the goal, right? I mean, I love farming, but I also don't like being in debt. So there's kind of this, you want to get ahead. So if you're on a personal lines homeowners or a personal lines auto, if there's a claim related to your farm business, bullet point number 2 is where there's a potential problem. That company can deny your claim if there is one, which then means you got to pay it out of pocket. So if you're at a market and somehow you get in there without having approved liability insurance through a commercial carrier or a farm carrier, and someone says, your eggs gave me salmonella. Chances are they just didn't know how to cook it, but let's say they say, your eggs gave me salmonella. The insurance company says, we didn't know John Smith was selling eggs at a market. That's a commercial activity. Your liability currently does not cover that. And you lied on your application because at the time we asked you if you were farming, and you said no, we're not going to pay this claim. So even if your case is good and your lawyer says you're not at fault, you get to pay for it. That's not a great way to start business. If a building burns down and you lose a piece of equipment, you're likely not going to lose your farm or your dream. You'll be stalled, you might be delayed, but you won't lose it. But if your liability is not right, game over. It's already a hard enough road for you. That's the last thing you want to get into. Some questions to ask yourself, whether you're a year away or 5 years away, and no matter what kind of structure you have. Are you protected if someone is coming to your property? And I've seen this my whole life. I still remember driving around in my grandpa's Cadillac in the back roads in Amish country in Middlefield, He'd be picking up sweet corn and freezing meat out of, Hirschberger's freezer, making, honey with the comb still in it. No one thought anything about it. Well, if you tripped and fell getting in and out of your car while picking up, that was your own darn problem, and that was the end of it. You got a hayride, a corn maze. If they're coming onto your property more than just a family reunion, there's a little more at stake there. There's more people you don't know. There's more people you don't trust. So you have to ask that question of yourself. Do you have enough protection if someone gets sick from a product? There's a lot of food allergies out there, and there's also a lot of people out there that they don't know how to cook. They don't know how to read the label, or they don't know how to say, hey, USDA, what degree should I cook pork to? 145, in case anyone's curious. So there's a lot of accountability that most people don't accept anymore. So unfortunately, you as the business owner have to provide that for yourself. And I know as farm ground gets harder to get, smaller lots are available. And of course, not everybody's sitting on $5, $10, $15, $20,000 in cash to pay for land. So you either have to finance it with a bank, or you might co-op some dollars with other owners. So if you're in that scenario where you're co-oping material, equipment, what have you, you really need to have a hard conversation with those partners that you're in finances with. Who's going to share the liability if this equipment is destroyed, or if the equipment's used incorrectly, or if you cause damage to somebody's property in the process? Or if someone comes on that shared property, well, who's dealing with it? That's a problem in my family. We have 100 acres that is in 4 siblings' names. All 4 siblings live elsewhere. That sounds like a legal nightmare to me. All 4 of their assets will get thrown into a legal suit if there's an issue. So those are some wonderful, thrilling, not exciting farm questions to think about in your business plan. A couple other ones that are a little easier to digest. Will your current insurance carrier honor or pay for a claim related to your activity? And it sounds like it should be a cut and dried yes or no, but there are carriers out there that have kind of a gray area. There's one carrier I know, they say, you know what, we will honor your small farming activity and your receipts up to $40,000 in sales. Well, dang, I wouldn't mind moving $40,000 in beef and still being on a homeowner's policy. But the reality is, most of these insurance carriers, their underwriting staffs are going through a lot of overturn, and they're not very knowledgeable about farming, and sometimes they don't read their underwriting guidelines as thoroughly as they used to. So, do you put it in the hands of someone that doesn't know your business? That's the only decision you can make. And of course, if you're going to markets and getting off the farm to sell your product, or you're going to a restaurant, what places, vendors, institutions will require the business liability insurance. What I'm finding with some of our trades and some of the new farms we insure is having the insurance actually opens more doors for them. Now, is it immediately profitable? No, but if you say, hey, restaurant X, I've got microgreens, this many bushel, mint, cilantro, whatever, here's proof of insurance. They don't have to ask, they don't have to guess, and that gives you a little leg up with tracing versus someone else down the street that might have the same volume, but they don't have the insurance. That keeps the accountability off the restaurant. Some basic questions we get in our office: is farm insurance expensive? I've updated this in the last 24 hours since sending this to you, Jeanette. So a couple add-ons. It just depends on what you're doing and what is that policy insuring. The smallest policy for farming on our book right now is $700 for an annual premium. That's 12 months. And that's covering a few buildings, one piece of equipment, and I think the liability is for cattle and hay. So when you think about all those different types of exposures, physical and liability, $700 for 12 months, that's really not bad. You sell one of those cows this guy has, you're already at $2,500 in theory. So that's not too bad. The largest one in our book was $90,000. Totally different end of the spectrum. He's doing a lot of transportation. He's doing a lot of livestock hauling. He's a whole nother arena. obviously his sales are very, very accelerated. You bundle your home and your auto under a farm policy, just like the commercials say, bundling does have preferred pricing with a lot of carriers. You certainly can do that, as long as the auto is being used in the farm in some capacity. I know a lot of folks that take hatchbacks, they put customized shelves in them, and it's great for their market. You could argue that with a farm carrier. Hey, this hatchback is a farm used vehicle. It does look funny, but it is a farm used vehicle. Okay. And of course, can you have a farm insurance policy if your house insurance is paid through an escrow account with your bank? And the answer is yes, you can. The bank might say, why the hell is the premium so much higher, or why is it different? What's all this other stuff on here? But yes, it is possible. They will eventually get it back in the escrow cycle. And if you don't have a house, and let's say you're on a renter's policy, you're renting an apartment from somebody and your land is elsewhere, you can still have a farm policy that way too. I use a house as a point of reference because a lot of folks who run into, they have the house first and they start to expand. Obviously, it's not always the case. This is a big one in counties with big groups of 4-H or FFA. If I'm hauling animals, basically anything hooked or meat, and they are killed in an accident, the car's overturned, you're T-boned, the trailer overturns, will your current insurance cover them? If you're on a standard auto policy or a standard homeowner's policy, the answer is no, because most of those animals are not considered pets. Chickens, we've seen court cases on. Kind of befuddles me that there's been court cases about chickens, but it is out there. But long and short, no, because again, they're not pets. But if you had a farm insurance policy with the trailer on it and then animals potentially insured as well, you could cover them for in transit or for value per head. There's a number of different ways to do it. Do you have to have an LLC, LTD, incorporation to have the farm or a business policy? The answer is no. Just like any other trade, you could be Joe Smith Construction, sole proprietor, Jane Doe, sole proprietor, Jane Doe Farm, John Smith Farm, whatever name you want. I would recommend from the legal perspective, whatever name you choose, try and be consistent. If you're going to use an incorporation, try and have that name on the land, have that name on your equipment. It makes tracking, makes your taxes, makes your legal liabilities a little bit more streamlined. When I think of farming, this is my son Milo. My daughter also likes to ride tractors, but she does it with dresses and polka dot boots. Hey, whatever works. But farming is more than just big green tractors or, hey, we're Beverly Hillbillies. It's about establishing whatever it is you want to establish and then moving it forward. Whatever that generation is. If you want to have a family, great, have a family. If you just want to do something that your family's never done, awesome, do it. There's not enough farmers to go around. So however you get there, get there. And there's our contact info. You can write it down, take a picture of it. Jack can share the slides with you guys as well. I'm sure we have time for a few questions from the room and anyone offline. John, if you have questions as well, feel free to chime in. I'll try and keep my eyes on the screen.
If you're going to ask a question, maybe a little background for Ty about what you're thinking about doing.
I have a lot of questions. Well, not really. You did a really good job covering a lot of the big questions. But, I mean, my husband and I are looking at properties starting next year in Geauga County. So this is very pertinent to your location.
Well, welcome to the far northeast side.
Yeah. So, from what I gather, like, my big concept is I do want to do a lot of agritourism, photographers in the flower fields, farm-to-table events. So we're shopping for land and a home to live on as well. So that was a big question my husband and I were interested in is do we keep our house in a one bucket and then my LLC of the business insured under a farm policy or all of the,
Right.
if it gets muddy.
Well, if your house assuming there's a house on whatever properties which you buy, if there is a house on that land, chances are, for the sake of deeding and titling, you'll probably have that house and that land in the same name, whether it's your incorporation or you as individuals. So if that is the case, you could do it as individuals, and what you would do on your insurance policy is you would add on what is called an additional insured.
Okay.
So it would then list your LLC as, hey, we do business here too, we are owned by the same people,
Yeah.
but this is the business operating name. And that's very normal, no matter where you are, because we do see that a lot. It starts off small, it's just individuals, and then the dream expands. Or the hobby gets very out of hand, as a lot of the 4-H club owners like to say, like, hey, we had 3 goats and now we have 30.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Okay.
And they find, you know what, maybe we should separate the legalities a little bit
Right.
for some protection purposes, or tax purposes, what have you.
And we, I mean, as a group, went to a property recently, and the minute we got on that property, he had to sign a waiver.
Okay.
So, at what level of concern, I feel like this property owner may have had some issues in the past, and so he's at high alert. But then we've also been on properties that are like, yeah, we have U-Picks, it's all so fun, we're having a good time, it is what it is. So at what level do we as owners have to be concerned? Like, do I need a sign at the driveway, say, come at your own risk, don't let go of your child, don't touch anything, or hug the goat, have the best time ever, like
Where is that middle ground?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that, and I'm gonna sound very lawyer-esque here, because unfortunately insurance and lawyers kind of hang out in the same groups, and we have really bad jokes and all those other wonderful things. But it really kind of is a case-by-case basis. We insure farm in Lake County. They've done hay rides and corn mazes for a while. The corn maze stuff has really tapered off for them. For whatever reason, they either can't market it right, or maybe they're just in the wrong location. They just don't seem to generate a lot of sales or traffic from it. And that's part of the business plan. Not everything is going to be there for the next 50 years for you. You're gonna have to change and adapt. For a while, they had the large agritourism signs out front that basically stated, hey, this is agritourism, you are responsible if you trip in a tractor rut, you know, on the 2-track in the middle of the corn maze, that's your own problem. Please don't eat the dry corn on the corn stalk because we don't want you to choke. Basic parenting and parental guidance things that most of us, I think, have grown up with and should practice. But there are families that just kind of view this as a unleash the dog's opportunity and let them run for a while and just hope they come back somewhat safely. A lot of it depends too on the agent they're talking to. So whoever's property went on that was making you sign waivers, they probably had a pretty strong rapport with their agent, and their agent was chirping in their ear and saying, if you don't sign these forms, we will non-renew your policy at the end of the year. Which isn't necessarily true. Again, it's a carrier case-by-case basis, but there's nothing wrong with covering your butt, because at the end of the day, it is your stuff on the line. And I don't want to pay for a lawyer to tell someone else, you're in the wrong, take care of your kid, don't let him chew on the dry field corn. I don't want to pay a couple grand an hour for that. We'll let the insurance company do that at no cost to us, other than the premium we've already been paying. So if all it is, hey, here's 12 waivers, sign them please. Unfortunately, 99% of the populace won't read them.
Right.
But at least you can say, between the sign out front and this piece of paper, I had to do diligence. And if it costs $50 at, you know, FedEx, Kinko's, wherever you do mass printing now for signage and papers, if that's what it costs for me to cover, you know, $300,000 of my life savings in cash on hand in your house, fine. Unfortunately, it's not a black and white answer for you. It's really going to just depend on a number of factors for your particular farm. If you're doing all agritourist activities like hay rides, corn mazes, and maybe some U-Picks, then it would probably just make sense to have a bunch of waivers. And you can find basic waivers online, and it doesn't have to be real big legalese. You can just, I've seen one paragraph. I'm not responsible if you twist your ankle in a rut for you eating the dry corn. For you eating unripe berries,
Right. But
you're
then-
here at your own risk, sign here.
Yeah.
Okay. With the farm to table stuff, that opens up a whole nother set of conversations and questions, because then you're talking about, okay, you have farm, raised food on site, who's preparing for the food, who's distributing the food.
Yeah, and that involves the health department too, which, yeah, I've dealt with
We
them.
love
They're
it.
not bad, they're not bad. but-
Every comment's a little different on the health department side, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, you see a lot of turnover in those departments as well. So
Right.
you get some folks that are brand new, and they really gotta find someone to sink their teeth into, even though there's no reason for it at all whatsoever. This is the world that you're about to enter, so God have mercy on your souls. But good luck, because there is still opportunity out there. There is a lot of land out there to be had that's being split up amongst families. There are folks that are looking for those experiences and for that product. And unfortunately, I think it took COVID to really wake up a lot of people and want them to have a little more local security and local impact. So no better time than the present for whatever it is that you're after.
I have a question about it being an insurance agent.
Sure.
Can you represent more than one insurance company? So could you work for both Nationwide and Progressive?
Yes, our agency became independent, what's that been, just over 2 years ago. And what that means in the grand scheme of things is that we work with multiple carriers with multiple products. So for most of the time that Cooper Sherman, our agency owner, and my father were in business, and when I started, they were what was called exclusive captive agents. So they only worked with one carrier, and that was Nationwide, whether it was Nationwide Home and Auto, agribusiness for the farm product, their commercial lines, life insurance. Nationwide changed their contracts with the agents, so they gave them a number of options, and some of the agents said, I still have skin in the game, I still need time, so we opted to go the independent route. So we serve predominantly 5 carriers. Nationwide and Westfield are 2 of our farm insurance carriers, and they're also Nationwide's the largest in the US. But I will say this, Nationwide has a great claims record in the agribusiness sector, but they are the creme de la creme of farm insurance. They're like the Cadillac. Cadillacs are nice to ride in, don't get me wrong, but maybe you don't need the Cadillac right now. Maybe the Chevy Impala will work just fine.
Well, I actually asked because my husband works for Progressive, and I was telling him about your presentation, and I asked him, I said, well, do you guys have farm insurance? He said, I don't think we really do, but exactly what you're talking about, the not Cadillac, and insuring like small urban farms, that kind of stuff, he seemed to feel was something that they might be interested in looking into, so.
I think it's a market that they have their eyes on, but I think like all insurance carriers, they are very slow to change and get a good grip on what are the ultimate risk of this type of business. Nationwide, to their credit, they were on the front lines of the agritourism protections.
Yeah.
Part of that is because Nationwide and the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, arguably the largest farming lobbying group in Ohio as well as the United States, they started off as the same company back in 1919. It was the Farm Bureau Mutual Automobile Insurance Company, and then they were forced to split in the 50s. So that's how they got on the front lines of that, and everybody else followed suit. The other carrier worked with Westfield. They're stationed right off of 71 in Lodi, Westfield Center. But they also have a similar beginning to Farm Bureau in that they started off basically in farm insurance, but they operate on a smaller basis. They're pretty prevalent in about 13 states, mostly in the Midwest. And they seem to have a better grip on smaller farm risk. So they're going to give you very solid coverage. May not necessarily be the Cadillac unless you really need it, but if that Malibu or that Impala is doing the job for you, there's nothing wrong with that.
My other question was, on Hayden's behalf, would like plant starts, would $1,000 in plant
I
start
was gonna-
sales?
I was gonna ask
count?
about like nursery stock,
Yeah.
and like, so like what kind of stuff can you insure, and at what like scales?
Most of Nationwide and Westfield, a lot of them will handle nursery stock on a smaller level, and I use the word smaller in a very broad sense, because they understand that at some point, if you get really good at what you're doing and you have a real good market, your starting nursery stock is not gonna be $1,000, $2,000. Your starting nursery stock is probably gonna be like $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. In that case, then you're looking more, not as much as a farm product, but more of a more traditional commercial activity in nursery.
Does that get insured under the same?
You could
groups, or
have
is
it
that
under the
different?
same agent and same company, it just might be classified a little differently.
Okay.
To give you a great example, there is a small farmer insurer in Barberton, and he has a lot of startup nursery stock, but he also does a lot of produce. Kind of a mixed bag, because I don't know any farm right now that can really afford to be a one-trick pony unless you're in dairy, and even now that has changed quite a bit in the last 10 years. So when we went to write his farm, Nationwide offered a lot of good built-in coverages, but they kind of said, keep an eye on the nursery stock, and I can't remember what the number was. I want to say if it exceeded somewhere around 50,000, then we might need to move it to Nationwide Commercial at that point.
Okay. But it's same agent, same kind of.
Right.
Yeah. Or conversation.
And nursery stock itself, depending on the carrier, they might have coverages for temperature sensitive situations. So if you're able to get into a hoop house, greenhouse, or a glass house scenario where the temperature can be controlled,
Yeah.
especially, again, Northeast Ohio, sub-zero temperatures, snow, things of that nature, that might be a coverage worth looking at.
Failures of equipment, or like just acts of God, temperature drops, kind of.
It could be both.
Both of them.
We've seen claims for electrical power outages. You know, hey, there was a lot of snow on the power lines and it took down the transformer. Well, that power line was generating the fan that was in my greenhouse. Well, act of God, that's a claim. Okay, did we have nursery stock insured as well, other than just the destroying of the transformer and the fan in the greenhouse? Okay, yes, we did. All right, then we start talking about, did the cost of the claim exceed a deductible? Probably a good rule of thumb, no matter what business you guys pursue, whether it's fruit, vegetables, nursery stock, livestock, keeping some cash on hand to cover whatever your deductible is. Most commercial deductibles now, the lowest I've seen is still 500. I've insured a few that are high as 10,000. Just depends on the business.
And then, so right now, I'm kind of working as like an independent contractor for landscapers. I'm doing
Okay.
a little bit of my own landscaping business. Right now, I just have everything organized in an LLC,
Okay.
and I'm probably at some point going to be looking for, probably soon looking for more general liability coverage for stuff like that. What kind of stuff do you suggest for new businesses that are?
In terms of just basic liability coverages, I think the lowest premium, the lowest farm liability premium I've seen on our book is around 700. I think some small nurserymen, tradesmen, general landscapers, I think I've seen $500 for just basic liability, no equipment, no nursery stock or anything like that. The limits, most carriers now, they're not looking at anything less than what's called 500,000 per occurrence, 1 million aggregate. And what that means in layman's terms is, let's say you have a claim, whatever that claim might be, they're not going to pay more than 500,000 for that particular occurrence. In the course of the policy period, that 1 year, they will not exceed a payout of more than 1 million. Now, if you had that many claims or that big of claims in that year, you got a lot bigger problems than anything else right now. So, in terms of liability limits, that's probably where you'd like to start. That's where most of them will probably start at. And the big question will be for any of you, whenever you get to that point in time, they're going to start looking at what kind of related experience do you have? whether it's in landscaping or management, business, you can reference this school. Even if they don't know what it is, at least you can reference it.
Cause then your risk goes down, kind of,
Yeah,
right?
in theory, when they start looking at it, and also it helps me as the agent, or whomever your agent is, just like a resume, just like an interview, the easier you can sell it, the easier you can shape yourself and sell yourself, not to prostitute what you're doing, the easier it is then for whoever the company is, their underwriting guidelines to say, yep, that's good, we'll accept that risk, and heaven forbid there is a claim, we're okay with it, we'll protect it.
So a solid business plan will
A solid business plan will certainly help.
lower your deductibles, potentially, or other costs.
For the insurance agencies, having a business plan itself isn't really a big factor. If you go to a lender, I know Farm Credit, at least for a while, they were really big. One, they had a new farm lending program. I'm not sure how much that has changed in the last few years, but I knew, at least for that, they were requiring some type of business plan to say, hey, if we're gonna lend you money for ag or landscape or whatever, you gotta show us something solid. You can't just say, I'm gonna sell 1,000 tomatoes, make $100,000 and live on green acres and live happily ever after. Can I have money, please? Unfortunately, it's just not that easy anymore, but.
Can your insurance premiums be deducted as a business expense?
I'm not an accountant. I believe to some degree they can be. There are also through Ohio Department of Agriculture, I do believe there is also a tax exempt form available online. So if you were buying farm supplies or landscape nursery supplies, twine, pruning shears, packaging materials, your quart, your pint baskets, things like that, I believe you can basically have that form, submit it to the IRS, and you can carry it with you whether you're going to Tractor Supply or Green Star Co-op or wherever it is you're getting your materials and say, I'm tax exempt, and they're going to say, prove it, and you just whip that out of your purse or your wallet and say, there it is.
That's a farm thing, right? That tax exempt thing, or is
Yes.
that like a business?
It's a tax exempt form, and it's just a one pager, a couple paragraphs, and you should be able to find on Ohio Department of Agriculture's website. And they're basically going to say,
It's different from the tax exempt vendor thing, right? As a
yes, it
vendor
is different than
license,
that.
yeah. Okay, but it's similar, I'm assuming,
Similar concept.
yeah.
I just had a question, so,
Just one?
Yeah.
employees and 1099, so is that, I don't know if where this falls, if this is a lawyer question or an insurance question or whatever. But let's say I have a 1099 employee worker on my farm, is that written into a policy? Is that something you guys take into consideration, employee insurance, or is that, how does that work?
There's usually a coverage for businesses, and it doesn't matter if it's farm or if it's carpentry or electrical or plumbing or bakery or whatever. There's usually a coverage called employer's liability, recognizing whether they're 1099 or salary, we have X number of employees here, and usually it's rated on either the number of employees and or payroll.
Okay. Because if you start out with no employees, but then you would have to call your insurance agents and say, like, now we're taking on this worker for 3 months, can we write them into the policy? Or is that something we would just project and say, probably in 5 years, I'm potentially gonna have a worker on my farm at some point?
I've seen it done both ways. I've seen new businesses say, we're probably gonna have a new worker, and instead of having to talk to you every quarter,
Yeah.
we love you guys, but we don't wanna talk to you every quarter.
Yeah.
Just rate it based on 2 employees,
Okay.
because our end goal is to have it. I've also seen people say, no employees for the foreseeable future, we'll do it all ourselves, we don't plan on sleeping, we love caffeine, so don't rate it until we call you. I haven't seen it with commercial, the bigger landscaping policies or nursery policies yet, but I imagine it's prevalent there as well. With a lot of farm policies, there are endorsements or coverage add-ons where they will rate you for seasonal employees. So if you have employees for 1 to 3 months, 2 to 6 months, or 6 months to a year, because especially up this way, you go get up to the lake, you have all the wineries, you have all the nurseries, and there's a lot of seasonal migrant labor first. So they're not gonna be there a full year.
Right.
Because, well, we don't believe in sunshine in Northeast Ohio or, warm
There
days
isn't
a lot of the time.
That's
So-
a lie. Show it to us, we'll believe it.
Right, right.
That makes sense.
Have you ever,
Did you have questions about, I know you don't do crop insurance, but you had a question about,
well,
so then,
I,
we were talking business stuff.
I guess I have two questions then. So I recently listened to a podcast where they were discussing different types of like crop insurance for non-traditional smaller farms, particularly it was a flower farm,
Mm-hmm.
and they were talking about like what kind of insurance can you even get for like something like that. And I wish I could remember and re-listen to it because my memory is a little hazy, but they seemed to mention that there was a product out there that was for more like general farm
Mm-hmm.
produce, like wasn't super specific in like this many dahlias. Because I think regular crop insurance is usually by like crop type and other
It's
stuff.
typically by crop type, region, and I believe volume, so they're looking
Yeah.
at bushels an acre typically is the
Yeah.
term that they're using. Again, that's not my forte, but what I have found over the years is in quoting farms and just in general talking about crop insurance is it really kind of comes down to what is I hate to use the business term, the cost benefit analysis.
Uh-huh.
So if you only have 10 acres of flowers
Mhm.
and you're using this 10 acres for photo ops for weddings and senior pictures and that type of thing, if you don't have the sunflowers for the year, what are your options? Forget crop insurance aside. So you have to think, well, what are my options? What did it cost to plant all those sunflowers that I have now lost? So I lost the revenue from taking the pictures. We lost the revenue from family reunions we used to host here, and I'm just throwing out a few other random things that may occur in a nice setting like that. So will crop insurance cover the loss of revenue, or are they just going to cover purely the loss of the sunflowers? And it goes back to what was the cost of the sunflower seed? What was the cost to irrigate if water was needed? Fertilizer was needed.
This is specifically, like, I'm just kind of curious, but this is specifically like florist supply and like weddings, kind of like real high value
Okay.
and like real diverse flower cropping, like growing for bouquets and different things. And I know like a significant amount of revenue was in the small acre and the flower cropping, but I was just curious.
I'm sure it is out there, but again, it will come back to what is the cost and
Yeah.
two, what is the deductible?
Yeah.
Because if the
Okay.
deductible for that is a minimum, let's say it's $5,000, and you lost 10,000, do you want to file that claim? That's a question that everyone asks. Doesn't matter if your house burns down or your greenhouse collapses from snow or if you lose all the
Yeah.
sunflowers. If you got a 5,000 deductible and the loss is 10 or whatever that number is, do you want to file the claim? Because not only does the insurance company pay out the claim for you, which is mighty nice of them, that's what you're paying premium for. The next year, you'll probably see a little uptick in your premium. It's called a claims charge. That's the way the insurance company recoups their money back. So you kind of have to figure out somewhere along the line, what's your threshold? I had a roof claim a couple years ago. They were nice enough to give me, what'd they give me? They gave me $7,000 for it. I wasn't expecting that. I had a $2,500 wind and hail deductible. But I didn't want to do the roof work myself, so I filed the claim, knowing I was going to move the next year too. Like, all right, I'll take the claims charge, fine. It was worth it to me.
And then my other question was, have you ever insured a co-op organization?
I have not insured a co-op. Talked to a few of them, but the questions always come up, okay, who is in this co-op? How is it legally structured? And who is ultimately responsible for whatever that loss might be? And usually I defer to whatever their co-op agreement is, and also if they're willing to give it, who's the name of their lawyer so we can actually talk about it, because their legally binding agreement will help dictate how do we protect it. Same thing with your bank. Unfortunately, the banks rule the world now, no matter how big or small. So if you're getting a loan for whatever the sizable amount, the bank will indicate to the insurance company, here is what we need either for proof of insurance or an amount of insurance. You go to buy a house. We are loaning $250,000, we need to see coverage for minimum $250,000. Okay. Hope that makes some sense.
Yeah. I have to run, but, see you guys.
Bye.
What other questions do we have here? Obviously, you sounds like you're not too far away.
Yeah, we're selling our house in June to transition to a larger property. I don't know where that's gonna lead. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna end up living with my dad for a while we search for the property because we don't wanna rush it. But yeah, so we're putting all of our ducks in a row right now and saving all of our money because it's expensive. So that's what. But I was talking to my husband last night, he's like, find out how much the premiums are. I'm like, okay, like, got it. And I know it all depends on the property, I mean.
It depends on the property, what you're doing, and like I said, the smallest farm on our book is about $700.
Right.
Biggest one we've had was $90,000.
And that small one sounded about like what you would want to
Right.
say for the agritourism part.
Yeah, and with what you're starting out on, it probably won't be much more than some homeowners policies. We wrote a farm policy with Nationwide just 3 months ago. They were insured with Erie for their house and their vehicles. We actually saved them money by moving them to a farm policy.
Mm-hmm.
Usually Erie kicks my butt on everything except farm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they didn't like where these folks live. It was not a very favorable fire district. It's where most of our farms are.
Yeah.
Out in the sticks, there's no sidewalks. Your fire department is volunteer and they're 5 miles the other way. So the rate was high for a number of those, even though the house was brand new.
So I guess that's something I didn't take into consideration is the county and location and the amenities that the city can provide. Is that a factor into the policy or not really?
It is to a degree.
Okay.
If you get a farm policy, they're recognizing, most farms don't live near the city.
Yeah.
So therefore, fire protection classes, fire departments, emergency personnel, they're probably on a volunteer or part-time basis, and they're not gonna be that close. So, okay, that's just how we rate it, that's how we deal with it. And they're okay with it because they understand it.
Yeah.
Your personal lines, like Progressive, we used to write Progressive homes. A lot of things we wrote, they did not care for because it was away from the city of Providence's. It was away from Chardon City, from Chesterland, from Chagrin Falls. It was Thompson, it was Montville, it was Auburn, it was, where's the fire department? Where's the closest fire hydrant? I don't know. There's a dry pond behind them, use that.
Yeah, okay.
So every carrier is going to look at it a little bit differently. Some carriers have really strong limitations. I think Progressive for a long time, I don't know if they still do, Progressive had a limitation in terms of number of acres.
Okay.
If you were more than 10 acres, they didn't care if you were farming, they didn't want it because they just assumed you probably would be farming,
Right.
which
Right.
I would be, so I don't blame them for that assumption.
For sure.
Other carriers, Westfield, I think their limit's 25 on personal lines homes.
Well, I guess that leads me to another question is, and I don't know if it's too generalized, of when it comes to agritourism, do we need to be concerned if there's 5 people or 500 people? Is that a different policy, or is that like based on the land? Like, you know, because I have a photographer and the 3 people, but then next month I'm gonna have 200 people at a wedding. Like, how do I deal with that?
Depending on who your agent is and whoever the carrier is, the 2 farm carriers we work with, Nationwide and Westfield, the way they would look at it is, okay, so you have an agritourist activity and it's not you pick, but you've got this event with 5 or 6 people, you have another event with 200. So what they'll probably say is, all right, you have a lot of people coming on property and it's not for you pick, not for this, it's not for hay rides, but it's kind of close in terms of rate, because they're not going to have a rate for every single thing under the sun.
Right.
So this is where having a good rapport with your agent, whomever that agent might be, you and your agent can help decipher to the agent's underwriting staff, all right, here's the closest thing to rate it by. Here's a comparable. So what they would probably do is they would tag on what's called an endorsement or a rider, and they will say agritourism activity or other farm revenue, and they'll either base it on number of people or sales for the year. So that way you're not nitpicking every single activity you have, because let's say you only have 15 people that use a photographer on the premise, but it's the same photographer. Well, then maybe your sales from the photographer is only like $1,000, but the wedding on the property, that's a few grand a pop.
Yeah.
Okay, well, total sales, let's say it's 10 grand in the year. Okay, you don't have to nickel and dime every single one. The premise is still the same. A lot of people come down the property to pose with the farm.
Okay.
But you gotta talk to your agent and tell them that.
Yeah, for sure.
You say that now.
I know.
Because if you're one of mine, I'm gonna remember this
No,
conversation.
you haven't met my husband. He'll be on.
We have some people, put them on, they don't call back, they don't write back, they don't email, they don't anything, and all of a sudden we get a call. Oh, hey, we upturned the peach orchard, we're doing this, we went total grain crops. When did this happen? Oh, last year. Did you by chance pick up a combine or a thresher or anything? Oh yeah, we got that too. Is it with a lender? Yeah. Any claims? No. Talk to your agent, whoever it is. Not everything results in more premium. It might lead to a heck of a lot more invasive questions,
Yeah.
but it doesn't necessarily mean more premium. And if you are paying more premium, here's the other benefit. He was talking about podcasts, and that's a dangerous rabbit hole to go down because I listen to a lot of them too. If you're making $1 million, in theory, you would say you're happy, right? Hey, I'm making $1 million doing my dream, whatever your dream is. If you said, well, I'm paying $300,000 in taxes, you'd be a little honked off, right? Well, your taxes are basically 30% of your income. So if you're paying a little more in premium, in theory, your risk is a little greater because you're doing well, because you have a lot to lose. Again, in theory.
Right, I mean,
So there's a positive look to insurance, which is not often looked at ever, but
yeah, I'm more of a safe person. I don't want to get sued by some person that said my kid's foot got stepped on by your goat. I want $2 million. Like, that's silliness. So.
I'll give you a great example of a claim. We had a young farmer, he opened up a farm on a large piece of acreage, borderline the city limits, and there was a house bordering the farm, so he bought that, moved into that. He had a painter come, was painting the exterior. The painter fell off the scaffold. Don't know how, but he fell off the scaffold. We get a letter from the painter and his lawyer, and they're seeking medical coverage. So I take this letter, I turn it to the claims adjuster with Nationwide, and they just start laughing. We've already gotten a call from the lawyer. He didn't have his own insurance. He doesn't have business insurance. He doesn't have health insurance. We're not paying his claim.
He's done nothing.
Denied, forget it.
Yeah.
But that's what your good insurance will do, because you're, in this case, Nationwide said, our insured had nothing to do with this. You were on your own scaffold, our insured wasn't even home. It's not our problem to pay your medical bill because of your own lack of jurisprudence. And our insured didn't have to pay a dime to say that.
Didn't even have to say that, you did. Your insurance person just said, here, take care of this for me. That's, yeah,
That's when it works.
yeah,
That's what it's for.
yeah.
Now, if it doesn't work, then obviously you can gripe all you want. So we understand she's on fast track. What about the rest of you? Where are you guys at in your business plan? What are you guys working on?
I mean, right now I am
So, question came in from John. Question was, would we insure an urban farm in the city? And my response, John, is I'd be certainly willing to look at it as long as there's actual farming activity taking place. It doesn't really matter to us whether it's in the city or in the country or in the township. So if it's hoop houses, high tunnels, if it was an abandoned city lot that got leveled and you brought in a whole lot of topsoil to clean it up, we can certainly take a look at it. I can't promise you rates, I don't make promises I can't keep, but certainly won't be afraid to put it forward.
I'll give you a call.
Please do.
Been around for 11 years.
Congratulations, that's great.
So we have hoop houses and all that.
Excellent. Are you guys insured currently with a farm insurance company?
No.
Okay. Well, I'll look forward to maybe coming out and seeing it.
Sounds like a plan.
Outside office visits are good. Is there good pastries nearby too, or coffee anywhere?
I'll find you some in University Circle.
Oh, I know there's a few in there. Thank you. I used to be a real heavy guy. Some things just don't change though. Bring on the pastries.
Food.
Yeah, we're around here to eat and talk about food while we're eating food.
Right. While you're growing food, while you're cleaning it.
Yeah.
What about you? What are you working on?
Well, I work with Countryside. I'm the marketing and communication specialist. So
Okay.
I came to record it, and I mean, I'm just like
Was
sitting
this
here
side good for the
working.
camera? Or was
Yeah,
this side?
perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll be sure to tell my wife and get that's nice. Your son has a full diaper. Go for it. What about you guys? What are you working on?
Well, this is my first year in the program here, and I think I'm using this time next year, I'll go to a different farm, but using it more as education. I don't have a business plan or anything yet, but keeping my options open for the future and just learning lots and seeing what might pull me one way or another.
It'll never end, and that's the best part about it. It never ends. If you stop learning, you are dead.
I mean, this is my first year in the program. I just graduated high school this past spring. I spent my whole life in 4-H involved with raising animals, kind of hobby farming a little bit, and so now I'm here doing some career exploration and seeing where I want to go in agriculture. So don't have much of a business plan right now. Still just exploring, seeing what's out there.
Congratulations and my deepest sympathies. And you?
Oh, hi, I'm Trish. I'm more like where Heather's at, where I'm my first year also. I'm just trying to figure everything out. I do have ideas in the direction I want to go in, but that's about it. Like I'm still looking at it.
It's nice to see, and I know this is going to really age me very quickly if the grays have not. It is nice to see enthusiasm and some mentally younger faces here. We had one of our dairy farms that's been around forever in Ashtabula County, went out there to review their renewal, update equipment. We were sitting in the milk house and George, it's really quiet in here. Where are the cows? I got rid of them 3 weeks ago. I got to sleep in for the first time in 50 years. And how late was that? 5 o'clock. How do you feel? I feel so good. I've made the best hay I've ever made. We got hay customers all over the place. I can't put an end to it. I never would have done that if I kept milking. Okay. So there was someone, that's has 4-generation dairy farm. 2 girls and a son, all have their hands in it in some capacity or another, and it's not worth it anymore. Milk prices were not worth it anymore. Taking care of that many had, just, it didn't add up financially or emotionally anymore.
Yeah,
And now he can
it's-
sleep in 2 more hours. And you know what? If I'm 65 years old and I got a chance to sleep in 2 more hours, I may not turn that down.
He's in Ashtabula, you should start growing grapes and jump on that train.
No.
That's a big
Here
train.
comes the
That is a big
spotted
train.
lanternfly, don't grow grapes.
Yeah. That is a big train in Ashtabula and Lake County too.
Yeah.
So if there's no other questions or thoughts, if you do think of anything, by all means, call, write, let me know. If it's late at night, go ahead, send it. 4 o'clock emails, or as long as they're not about claims, are always welcome.
You never want me to know about a claim.
I don't know how to email that one.
My house is burning. Why are you writing me? Call claims now. Don't tell me about it. Call the fire department.
Yeah.
Little things.
Well, this was very informative,
Yeah.
and not boring at all, so.
No,
we
that's good.
appreciate it.
It was good timing too, because we did just recently go to this property. It was clear the gentleman had issues with assurance, and there were waivers and signs, and he didn't even really want us to touch the berries, and like it was. And we've been on other farms where there wasn't a thought in that process, so it's nice to see the different perspective and hear from an insurance agent on. I mean, I think you should be cautious for sure, especially if you're letting someone on your farm, but I think he has a history of issues.
Yeah. And unfortunately, if you have a history of issues, that means you have to take a little more extreme precautions.
right,
And either your lawyer or your agent's chirping in your ear and saying, hey, you need to do this so there's not problems for you down the road.
Yeah.
It's just the unfortunate reality, whatever business
Oh.
you're in.
Another question. Okay, now that we're talking about
I knew you were lying when you said before.
So let's talk about Airbnb and insurance on my farm or camping. Do you care about that? I'm sure you do. But like I've heard people say, it's fine, I have coverage by Airbnb, not my problem, I'm not gonna buy a policy for my Airbnb, or I put a picnic table by a fire ring, now it's a campsite, but hipcamp.com is covering me on that. I don't have to worry about that. Or should I be the paranoid person and say, I have all the things covered? So where's the, I mean, I know you're an insurance agent, so you're gonna say, I want you to have a policy.
Well,
But is Airbnb a reputable source to rely on if I have people, because signing
that
that
is-
waiver through
and that
Airbnb.
is the great first question to ask is, what is it in the Airbnb structure, legal agreement? Because I'm not insured at Airbnb,
Yeah.
I know that Allstate, one of our carriers, they will write some policies for Airbnb related units. I don't know if that would extend to farm policies, because I know Allstate does not really do well in rural areas to begin with. So yes, their forte might be Airbnbs, but does it apply to Ashtabula County or Girard County or Trumbull County, or you get further over to Akron Canton area, down that way, you get Navarre or Spencer, you get over there. I don't know if those two things would be able to mix and match.
Right.
I don't know what Airbnb promises the folks that are in their network in terms of liability coverages and extensions. The only point of comparison that I would have would actually be Uber, in that Uber, at least initially, they had a policy where, and I think Progressive was their preferred carrier for that market. If you are on the clock at Uber, but no one is in your car, your current personal lines carrier, whoever it might be, was responsible for whatever claim you had. The minute someone entered your car or Uber business is when the Uber policy would extend to it. To me, that just sounds like a lawyer legal conundrum that I would never want to enter in the first place. But I don't know if that's already changed in the past year. Because I know Uber's had a ton of legalities, and I know insurance carriers on certain subjects, they are very swift on These are things we will do or not do. I have seen some type of what I would call temporary camping program going through Ashtabula and Lake County. I think it's rvcamper.com. I can't remember the name of the group, but basically it's people, they go on an extended camping trip and they will park at the winery, sample the winery's goods, go back to the camper and go to sleep in the driveway of the winery.
Right, so who's liable now? Like that camper gets broken into and they get murdered. Is the winery liable because they are on their property?
If it is theft, I would initially assume whoever owns the camper, and if the theft occurred within the camper or stole the spare tire or whatever, the compressor, safety system, I would assume then whoever the insurance carrier is for the camper is going to deal with the theft, because you're in a camper. That means you're going to be mobile throughout the continental US and maybe even Canada. That coverage should follow you wherever you go. Just because you're in the winery's driveway doesn't change it that much. Now, if said owner of the camper breaks into the winery,
Yeah.
now it starts to get really hairy really fast. Why the hell was the camper there in the first place staying overnight?
Yeah.
Are they relatives? No.
Right.
Were they paying customers? Yes. Why are they in a camper in your driveway?
Right.
Did they sign a release for it? What coverages did this camper program extend to those that are acting as host? I don't know, because I don't have any, and we haven't had to ask that question or answer that question.
Right.
So you can make this as deep and as gnarly as you really
Yeah.
want, and then you're gonna go home and cry because you're just gonna be so overwhelmed with thinking about it.
Oh, I do this all the time. I think about all.
Well, you need to sleep, because if you're gonna be
Yeah.
farming, you're gonna need whatever you can, so.
Because it does make me wonder if I have an event with alcohol, and that's a whole nother can of worms now. You know, your farm to table event. I mean, I've been to them where I noticed some people probably should not have been getting in their cars and driving home. So then who's liable? Is that catering company who rented that land, the landowner, or the person getting in the car? That's a whole nother can of worms. But I do think about these things, especially if I'm gonna have a property with people potentially having a farm to table event and alcohol involved. These are liabilities.
Those are great questions to ask yourself, and whoever your agent or carrier might be. I know when I had worked with Farm Bureau previously, we had a farm to table event in Trumbull County, and we ran into this very interesting conundrum. We asked for a temporary permit from alcohol department, and they refused it because the county and the town, well, not the county, the township we were in Trumbull County was actually still a registered dry township.
Oh, boy. That still exists. Wow.
So we had the alcohol. Anyway, Farm Bureau then got a one-time event rider recognizing alcohol would be served.
Yeah.
I think it was, at the time, maybe $400 for $1 million coverage.
Yeah, there's so many little nuances that we can go
There's
down.
a lot of little nuances and a lot of underwriter interpretations. It can be obnoxious when you're business planning because you want to forecast your budget and your expenses and things like that. And then on the other hand too, you just want to keep what you have and not lose it. And so you start thinking, well, what about this? What about that? You can insure yourself to the gills, but then you're cash poor.
Right.
So whoever your agent is, whether it's your parents' agent or me or whoever, having an honest conversation about your assets involved and finding that sweet spot in protection, what makes the most sense, what can you afford. I could sell you all the insurance you want.
Right.
There's an insurance company out there for everything. You want to pay for it, knock yourself out. But do you really need it? Is it really applicable? Is it going to actually insure whatever it is you need insurance for? I'll give you one tidbit. Who's the youngest person in here? Probably you two. So you're just out of high school, 18, 19?
Yes.
Okay. This is going to be a very old man comment. And again, gray hairs, children. and on insurance, so forgive me. Get yourself a life insurance policy,
Yes.
Now-
All day long,
and I would go with a whole life insurance policy
when you're healthy.
because you are young, you are healthy, and here's the benefit of the whole life. Yes, it's a little more expensive than term because that's a designated number of years. But that whole life will go until you die. So let's say you get to 85 or 90, where you'd be like all my great aunts and they all went 3 digits because we love sauerkraut juice in our family. That's our secret. That and old Canadian club under the counter that no one's supposed to know about. That goes your whole life without question as long as you pay for it.
Yeah.
The other piece too, because you're talking about business, you can borrow against it like a bank without having to deal with the bank. So if you have a $100,000 whole life policy, they're gonna put aside some of your premium payment for what's called cash value. It's like a conservative savings account, better rates than savings accounts right now anyway. So 10 years from now you say, hey, I got this farm off the ground. I need to get a little 25 horsepower tractor for whatever the reason. I don't have $30,000 in cash right now, but I do have $40,000 in cash value on my life insurance policy. You go to your life insurance agent and you say, I want to take out that cash value. They say, okay, sign here, sign here. You pull that out. You now have cash to do whatever. My dad built a barn with some of his. Mom wasn't thrilled about that, but he's got other policies, so it all worked out, and she stores a bunch of stuff in the hayloft now. So we're all good in that front. You can either not pay that back, which is fine. They just subtract it from the death benefit. So if you pulled out $40,000 in cash value and your policy was for $100,000, 100 minus 40, you still have 60 left for the rest of your life to cover burial costs. You want to give some to kids or grandkids or whomever. Hale Farm, Century Village, Countryside, you want to do a big donation with it, go for it. Or you can pay it back like a loan for very minimal over time. If you're familiar with Northern Geauga County, Portage County, Great Lakes Cheese, that was started with a whole life policy.
Oh, and it's huge now.
They're massive,
Huge, and keep getting bigger.
yes.
I didn't know that.
But there's your really nerdy insurance tip of the day that might actually be helpful to you in a few years.
No, now you won't allow it.
Now your wheels
No,
just,
no.
your
My
wheels,
husband
your
will
wheels
not
never
allow
really
it.
stop. You never got in the rut, you just keep going and going and going.
I like business and things of that nature, so I'm excited about this project, so.
That's good.
we'll see.
Better to be excited than to be like Charlie Brown and never managed to kick the football. Lucy always pulls it out from me.
Yeah, this is hopeful. Just have to find the property now.
Yep. Well, if there's no other questions, again, if you think of them later, by all means, write, call, let me know.
Cool, thank
And
you.
if you post it to the communications and other people have questions later, welcome those too. But good luck, Godspeed. Hang whatever lucky devices or units or charms you might have. If it means wearing the same wool socks 5 days straight, fine, do it. You're gonna smell like dirt anyway, so why not?
Yeah.
Well, Jeanette, that's all I have.
All right, I'm wondering too if maybe you'd be willing to do a similar presentation this winter for the farmers in our network, just
Sure.
because they have a little more downtime
Sure.
and I think a little more availability.
Was that November? Was that a November date I think you were talking about?
Oh, that was just a backup for
Oh, okay.
these guys, probably more like January.